Hi, my name is Amanda Montoya, and I'm an associate professor of psychology at UCLA. In this video, we're going to talk about writing for registered reports. Our lab has been involved in many registered reports, and here we provide some advice accumulated from our experiences and the experiences of the participants in our research. After watching this video, you will be able to list the sections in a Stage 1 and Stage 2 submission. We will also discuss two options for structuring a Stage 1 submission and discuss the relative pros and cons of each. We will also discuss how to write for registered reports and how that differs from writing for traditional papers. I want to start with what the final product will look like. This is your Stage 2 manuscript. Ultimately, a final registered report should look no different than a traditional paper does on the surface. It will have each of the sections that a traditional paper tends to have. So for some, that might look like having an introduction, methods, results, discussion, and conclusion. But also the body of the paper may vary based on what field it is that you're working in. So if you work in a field where there are multiple studies per paper, then this body structure might repeat for each of the individual studies. I personally work in a field where the body of the paper tends to have a mathematical derivation section, a computer simulation, and a data example. Ultimately, one section that is not in a traditional paper, but you will find in registered reports, is a deviation section. This describes any deviations from your registered approach. So anything that you had to change in Stage 2 that you initially said something else in Stage 1. In the end, the point is that the Stage 2 paper should look very similar to a final traditional paper, but the steps that you'll use to get there look somewhat different. The Stage 1 manuscript is the one I think most people feel kind of unsure about. What goes in this? It should contain as much of the final paper as is possible to write without actually knowing the results of the study. And this is what helps researchers avoid hypothesizing after results are known or harking. There should be an introduction section and methods. Then there should be one of the following two options. In some fields, it's common to use a data analysis plan as part of a traditional paper, in which case you might find that writing an analysis plan as part of a Stage 1 manuscript is very natural. In other fields, it's common to describe the analyses as the results are being reported, in which case you might find that writing a results section which includes space for information to get filled in later. So I'll talk a little bit more about what this looks like shortly. Typically, you can't change any part of your Stage 1 manuscript other than small text revisions after it's received an in-principle acceptance. So the introduction, methods, and then your analysis plan should be set in stone from the beginning. Next, what I want to do is dig into these individual sections individually. The introduction section is meant to set up the research question and hypotheses and describe the state of research in that area. This is not really different in a registered report than an introduction. But you may find that you're used to writing the intro section after already knowing the results of the study, in which case you might be used to setting up the introduction to lead the reader to a specific expectation about the results of the study that typically align with the actual results. This is a form of hypothesizing after results are known, and so you might experience a little bit of discomfort as you're trying to write an introduction without actually knowing what the results of the study are. Instead, with a registered report, you want to emphasize why it's important to learn the answer to this question, and you may want to point to evidence that suggests that multiple possible outcomes could occur. You'll want to focus less on why the outcome of the study is inevitable, as this may lead reviewers to feel the research is not worthwhile since the result is a foregone conclusion. Use this as an opportunity to set up some mystery. While the structure of writing may feel less comfortable when you start out, because it's quite different than what you've done before, it's actually very freeing, and you may find that you really enjoy it. Next, we're going to talk about the methods section. Just as in the introduction, the methods should look very similar to a methods section in a traditional paper. You're describing your plan for what you will do. Because you will not have done the actual study yet, you may find that reviewers request more detail than you might be used to providing, and you need to include potential contingency plans. Journals, reviewers, and editors that subscribe to the idea of registered reports also tend to value replicability. So it's useful to write with the idea that someone will use this paper and its supplementary material to replicate your work. You'll need to provide sufficient detail to achieve this. Most journals publishing registered reports also require a sample size justification as part of a stage 1 submission. This can be achieved using a power analysis or arguments about resource limitations. Next, I want to talk about that final section. There are two main approaches to the final sections of the stage 1 registered report: a data analysis plan and a results section with blanks. The data analysis plan gets published with the final paper, whereas the results section will have the blanks filled in prior to publication. One issue that I've experienced with the data analysis plan is that a narrative description of analysis can overlook some of the analytical steps and lack sufficient detail. Whereas when I'm pre-writing a results section, this will facilitate thinking through all of the steps. Especially if a data analysis plan has a lot of contingencies, writing out a results section with blanks for every possible contingency can be very onerous. Whereas a data analysis plan is a little less work when there are a lot of contingencies. At stage 2, even if you've written a data analysis plan, the results section will have to be written anyway, whereas the results section may already be written at stage 1. Filling in the numeric information is pretty formulaic and avoids delays from writing. Obviously, you can see that there are pros and cons to each approach. Whichever method you choose, I think it's very important to think about what kinds of tables and figures you'll make. And you can even make fake tables and figures to help reviewers see your vision. Next, I want to show you some examples of each of these kinds of sections. Here is an example data analysis plan. It's a narrative that describes the analytical steps that will be undertaken. We describe that we'll test for normality and heterogeneity, but we didn't say what exact test we would use. And I think if we had pre-written the results section instead, we might have caught that issue earlier. This is an example of a results section with blanks. You'll notice that they included X's anywhere that numeric information needed to be input later. They also include text in brackets to align with the interpretation of the results. It's a good exercise to think through how you would write about each different result, and can even be helpful for thinking through how you might think about whether there are conflicting results. However, as you can imagine, if under certain circumstances, whole chunks of this results section might not even be there, you could essentially find yourself writing 2 or more results sections that will not all be included in the final paper. So that can be a little onerous. Next, I want to talk about just an overarching theme within your stage 1 registered report. And this is alignment across your sections. It is really important that across all of the sections, information is aligned and easy for reviewers to understand. One way to do this is by using your hypotheses and research questions as a driving organizing feature. I recommend numbering your hypotheses or research questions to allow for reference throughout the text. Then, in the analysis plan or the results, you would reference back to those hypotheses. For example, you might say something like, hypothesis 1 will be supported if this test statistic for this parameter estimate is greater or less than some threshold. And you may also want to be very explicit about what evidence would support or refute your hypothesis. In summary, the sections of the Stage 1 and Stage 2 manuscripts largely align with traditional papers. Stage 1 has an introduction, methods, and data analysis plan or results section with blanks. Stage 2 is the stage 1 manuscript plus a deviation section, results, and discussion and conclusion. We recommend selecting between a data analysis plan and a results with blanks early in the writing process. There are pros and cons to each, so you can select based on your current project. Our lab has done both. Overall, the structure of the writing is very similar to a traditional paper, but you might find that the content is somewhat different. As you're exploring new ways to write, especially an introduction section, without knowing the results of the study. Additionally, when you write for registered reports, it's common to be more detailed, especially in the methods and analysis descriptions. I hope you found this video helpful in getting started with writing your first registered report.